Hi, I am Uriel.
And I'm Zoe. Welcome to the serial podcast story called The Founder, a Cyberpunk Parable.
We are broadcasting this podcast from Earth Prime.
Yeah, I know that may sound a bit weird, but if you stick around to the end, we promise we will explain that to you.
So, before we really jump into the deep end of the source material today, I wanted to just set the stage for how you should actually experience this deep dive.
Right, yeah, because it's a bit unique.
Exactly. I want you to imagine that what we are doing here today is, well, it's essentially an audiobook experience.
Mm-hmm.
Only at this current moment in time, there is no physical book. Like, there are no pages you can actually flip through.
No hardcover sitting on your shelf.
Right. What exists right now is strictly this immersive audio journey. We've got this massive, intricate stack of narrative files and telemetry logs and character subroutines from this incredible story.
And our entire mission is to guide you through it, dissect it, and really get to the bottom of what makes it tick.
Yeah, and we really do need to guide you through it because the scope of this universe is just staggering.
It really is. And before we look at the specific narrative beats, and don't worry, we are keeping this completely spoiler-free regarding the endgame.
Oh, definitely. No spoilers.
We need to give you a sort of conceptual book cover overview of what we're actually looking at.
A bird's eye view, basically.
Yeah, exactly. At its absolute core, this story is a narrative history of the entire universe. We are talking from the initial compilation of reality all the way to its ultimate systemic conclusion.
Which is huge.
Right, but the genius of it is that this massive philosophical history is entirely wrapped inside the shell of a high-stakes, adrenaline-fueled cyber thriller.
Which, I mean, that sounds completely wild when you first hear it.
It does.
But the central metaphor that holds this whole thing together is just so beautifully constructed. It asks you to conceptualize our universe as something analogous to a massive, infinitely complex virtual server.
Mm-hmm. And the creator of this server, God, is known in this story as the Founder.
Right, but there's a massive distinction here that we really have to clarify right up front.
Yeah.
The Founder is not a machine.
Oh, absolutely not. That's crucial.
We aren't talking about a cold, unfeeling supercomputer calculating probabilities in a sterile room. The Founder is a living, profoundly relational being.
He is infinitely more alive, more dynamic than anything existing within the universe itself.
That distinction is everything, because running on this cosmic server is something called the Logos.
Right.
In the framework of this universe, you can think of the Logos as the ultimate living code. It's the master patch.
It runs the physics engine, basically.
Exactly. So it dictates the rules of gravity, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces.
Yeah.
But simultaneously, from the exact same source code, it runs the moral engine of the universe.
Which is such a cool concept. The laws of cause and effect in human behavior are written in the exact same language as the laws of thermodynamics.
Yeah, and connecting us, the end users or the nodes to the Founder is the living signal.
The living signal, right.
That acts as the ultimate connection interface, which is the story's brilliant analogy for the Holy Spirit.
I think what absolutely hooked me on this narrative is how it uses the language of systems architecture, coding, and networking to explain these incredible, profound, ancient spiritual dilemmas.
Like we were talking about things like the nature of miracles, right? Or the rapid descent into societal chaos.
Or even the crushing weight of digital addiction.
Yeah, exactly. By filtering these ancient human struggles through the lens of modern system dynamics, it gives rational, technically minded thinkers a completely new vocabulary.
A vocabulary to engage with concepts that our modern society has often just, discarded as fairy tale.
Right. It takes the mystical and makes it structural.
Exactly. And in doing so, it completely redefines what we think of as true cyberpunk.
Oh, yeah. If you are a fan of the genre, you know that traditional cyberpunk is essentially a high-tech, low-life dystopia.
It's usually characterized by this heavy, neon-lit nihilism. Everyone is surviving, but no one is truly living.
Yeah, society is just sinking into a puddle of corporate greed and despair.
But this story, it has all the grit, it has the intense pain, the corporate overlords, and the severe trauma of a dystopia.
But instead of sinking into that comfortable nihilistic despair, the narrative is radically vulnerable.
Yes, it is infinitely hopeful. The dark in this universe is so much darker than your standard dystopia, but the light is blindingly bright.
Well, with that framework established, I don't want to waste another second. Let's jump right into the zero latency bandwidth of the heavenly subdimensions.
Okay, let's do it.
The story opens far above the neon-drenched sprawl of the 21st century's Silicon sector. We are immediately introduced to an archangel named Uriel-4.
And the visual here is just stunning. Uriel-4 is projecting this massive, bleeding red, holographic telemetry map of Earth.
And standing right alongside him is Veritas.
Right, who is described as a high architecture angel made entirely of coherent golden light.
It's a breathtaking opening image. And that holographic glow bleeding red isn't just for dramatic effect, is it?
No, not at all. It represents a terrifying reality. Uriel-4 is observing that the war of influence on Earth has entered its most volatile, dangerous phase.
Right, because he notes that the enemy isn't using physical armies to conquer geographic borders anymore.
From a system dynamics perspective, that is terribly inefficient. Instead, the enemy is conquering the single most valuable, finite resource left on the planet.
Human attention.
Exactly. Veritas points out a brilliant historical shift. She says the battle for the human soul isn't being fought on dusty Roman roads with Greek and Latin anymore.
It is actively being written in Python, JavaScript, and predatory engagement algorithms.
Which leads us to the introduction of a concept called the Beast Protocol.
Right. Now, in this universe, the Beast Protocol is a system meticulously designed to optimize for maximum systemic entropy.
It is the architectural blueprint for building a digital prison that the inmates actually never want to leave.
They will literally fight you if you try to unplug them from it.
Yeah, and Uriel-4 drops this line that I have just not been able to stop thinking about. He says, "We cannot fight an algorithmic war with agrarian metaphors."
Oh, wow. That is powerful.
It's one of the most profound statements in the entire source material. I mean, if you look at ancient texts, you see pastoral analogies.
Wheat and tares, shepherds and sheep, vineyards.
Right. Those metaphors were perfect for an agrarian society because they mapped perfectly onto the listener's daily reality.
But Uriel-4 is recognizing that those old ways of explaining truth just aren't enough to combat a highly sophisticated, invisible digital threat.
A threat that is actively exploiting human neurochemistry. The founder needs a new deployment. The heavens need a new interface to translate the light into a language the modern digital mind can actually comprehend and compile.
I really want to pull on that thread for a second. Think about last time you were lying in bed at 2 in the morning, right?
Oh, I know where this is going.
You're exhausted, your eyes hurt, but you are just doom scrolling. You cannot stop flicking your thumb upward on a feed that is just spoon-feeding you enraging news or political tribalism.
Or those weird vanity traps that make you feel terrible about your own life.
Exactly. According to this story's framework, that isn't a lack of willpower on your part. That is a system operating exactly as intended. But my question is the suggestion here that these real-world social media networks are intentionally, maliciously designed as prisons from day one? Or is it just the accidental byproduct of an ad revenue model that got completely out of hand?
See, that right there is the terrifying genius of system dynamics. From an impartial analytical perspective, it almost doesn't matter if the original code was written with malicious intent by a villain.
Or with simple, naive profit motives by a college kid in a dorm room.
Exactly. A system will always brutally optimize for the exact metric you give it. If you build a platform and tell the algorithm, optimize purely for time on site so we can serve more advertisements, the algorithm is going to run 1 million A/B tests.
And very quickly, it will figure out that human beings are neurologically, evolutionarily hardwired to pay attention to threats.
We pay attention to outrage, to tribal conflict, to fear. The system didn't necessarily set out to make humanity miserable.
It just set out to capture our attention at any cost.
Yeah.
And misery has simply proved to be the most cost-effective bait.
Now, in the context of this story, that natural systemic drift is explicitly weaponized. The enemy takes that natural architectural flaw and supercharges it into the Beast Protocol.
And to fight this protocol, the heavens need a countermeasure. Veritas identifies 2 extremely fragile human files.
The angels determine they need a high-precision edge device to rewrite the digital infrastructure, and they need a radiant node to rewrite the culture.
We're going to get to the radiant node later in the discussion, but for the edge device, Veritas pulls up the lifelog of a young, unknown boy named Eli Reed.
But there's a massive complication here. When Uriel-4 looks at Eli's file and the file of the other vessel, he sees that their trauma is severe.
Yeah, they are already drowning in the cultural radiation of the Beast Protocol.
But Veritas explains something that sounds almost counterintuitive. She says that to handle the massive voltage of the founder's direct transmission, standard, healthy, well-adjusted human builds are completely insufficient.
Right. The vessels have to undergo a total system crash of their ego. They must be annealed.
Which, if you aren't familiar with metallurgy, annealing is a process where you heat a metal up to an extreme temperature and then let it cool very slowly to remove internal stresses and toughen it.
Veritas is basically saying these individuals must be annealed in the intense fires of their own ambition and their own despair before they can hold the code.
I have the quote from Veritas right here, actually, and I want to read it because it is so moving. She says, "The developer does not seek the pristine. He makes light out of the darkness. Their scars will be their credentials."
Wow. It takes everything we think about perfection, especially in a digital age where everyone is applying filters to look flawless, and it completely flips it upside down.
It really does. It's a profound theological and architectural statement. It suggests that flawless, unblemished code isn't actually robust enough to carry the heavy transformative weight of the logos in such a dark age.
Think about it in terms of software security. If you want to build an impenetrable defense system, you don't hire a programmer who has only ever written clean theoretical code in a classroom.
You hire the hacker who has broken into systems, who has seen their own code fail, who understands exactly where the vulnerabilities are.
Veritas is saying the founder requires code that has been hacked, broken, and rewritten, because only that kind of mind truly understands the depths of the local minimum of pain.
Exactly.
So if this algorithmic war is raging in the zero latency bandwidth of heaven, how does it actually manifest for a kid on the ground? Let's transition from the celestial realms right down into the physical substrate of the early 21st century.
We meet Eli Reed, and he is not living in some gleaming utopian tech campus in Silicon Valley.
No, he is surviving in the crumbling, neglected concrete projects of the Detroit node. The environment around him is heavily optimized for his complete destruction.
Statistically speaking, if you look at the algorithms of society based on his zip code, his socioeconomic status, and his environment, his life is precompiled for failure.
The systemic entropy around him is deafening. Poverty, crime, systemic neglect, it's all pushing down on him.
But Eli is an anomaly in the data set. He is neurodivergent, and the way the story describes his perception is just fascinating.
Right. He doesn't experience the world as a linear sequence of events like you or I do. He sees the world as a cascading, real-time stream of metadata.
To the medical and educational establishments, he is simply flagged as a compromised, uncooperative node on the autistic spectrum. They see a glitch.
But to the angelic watchers monitoring the telemetry, he has the uniquely high signal-to-noise ratio.
Let's break down what that actually means in practice. In a world that is absolutely overflowing with distracting garbage data, Eli's brain has this incredible capacity to isolate the pure, essential information.
While everyone else is distracted by the noise, Eli sees the underlying math.
But seeing the math doesn't automatically protect you from the physical realities of the Detroit projects. To survive his environment, Eli has to run what he calls emulation mode.
Emulation mode. He effectively writes a masking algorithm for his own personality, hiding his massive processing power behind this tough, detached exterior.
Right. He runs with the local crew. There's Brick, who is this physically imposing guy with a deceptive street-level brilliance.
And there's Static. Static has this restless kinetic energy, and he's constantly carrying around this Bluetooth speaker, pumping out distorted Detroit trap beats with a blown-out 808 bass.
I love the dynamic of this crew because it feels so grounded. And the origin story of how Eli earned the nickname El Mago, or the Magician, tells you everything you need to know about his internal operating system.
Yeah, before they were a crew, Brick used to corner Eli and try to bully him for his lunch money. Classic schoolyard hierarchy.
Eli quickly calculates that his physical hardware, his body, is no match for Brick's strength, so he uses his gift.
He essentially tells Brick, "Why are you hustling me for a few crumpled dirty dollars when I can get you so much more?"
And right there in the hallway, Eli demonstrates his ability to bypass physical and digital firewalls effortlessly. He hacks the school's vending machines to dump all their snacks.
And he bypasses the digital locks on the administrative supply closets.
But, and this is the detail that makes Eli such a compelling protagonist, he establishes a strict, non-negotiable moral loop for himself.
Right. He agrees to be the operational asset for the crew. He'll hang out with them, he'll run the hacks. But he refuses to actually take any of the items himself.
He will only open the doors. He only breaks the locks.
He will exploit the system's vulnerabilities to prove he can, but he draws a hard, definitive line at physical theft.
It's a brilliant character detail. It's his way of negotiating his physical survival in a brutal environment while simultaneously trying to maintain some semblance of a clean code base, morally speaking.
He recognizes that the system around him, the school, the city, the economy, is completely broken and corrupt. So hacking, it feels like leveling the playing field. It feels like justice.
But his own internal conscience still demands a boundary. He's trying to compile his life without introducing a fatal moral error.
I really want to talk about this emulation mode concept for a second because it really struck a nerve with me.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about how often we see this exact dynamic playing out in our own reality. How often do we take these high-performing, divergent, edge device, human minds kids who just process reality differently and force them to completely mask their true operating systems?
We make them pretend to be someone else just so they can survive the rigid, standardized, fluorescent-lit environments of our public schools. It's tragic.
It is a massive, cascading systemic failure.
If you look at educational architectures, they are typically built for batch processing. They are designed like factories. They need to move large, predictable volumes of standard human nodes through the system as efficiently as possible.
When an edge device like Eli enters that system, his inputs and outputs simply don't match the standardized API. The system doesn't know what to do with him, so it flags him as an error.
It punishes him rather than recognizing him as an advanced processor operating on a completely different, highly advanced frequency.
So Eli has to waste immense amounts of his cognitive bandwidth just running that emulation mode, just pretending to be normal so the system won't actively attack him.
And the ultimate, undeniable example of this systemic blindness comes with the state testing incident. This is the moment in the story where Eli completely unintentionally shatters the academic firewall, and it is glorious.
It really is. It's state testing day. For the school, this is life or death for their funding. But Static and Brick are planning to skip. They have zero interest in the test.
They want to hit up an unlocked arcade cabinet downtown, and they tell Eli to ghost with them.
But Eli refuses. And he doesn't refuse out of some deep sense of academic duty. He stays entirely because the school is offering a bribe of hot bacon and eggs to coax the kids from the projects to actually show up and take the test.
He literally ignores his friends and stays for the school bacon. It's such a perfect teenage detail.
So he's sitting there in this cold, echoey gymnasium. He's got a full stomach, and the silence of the room allows his brain to drop into what he calls a code trance.
Now, for the administrators pacing the aisles, this test is a rigid, defining metric of human intelligence. It is the ultimate assessment.
But for Eli, sliding into this trance, the questions on the paper aren't challenges. They are agonizingly slow, simplistic logic gates.
He processes the variables, crunches the data, and finishes a grueling, comprehensive 3-hour exam in exactly 22 minutes.
And he doesn't just finish it. He gets a flawless, zero deviation, 100%.
When the administrators run his bubble sheet through the optical scanners, the software processes it and immediately flags it as a statistical impossibility.
The system's predictive model simply cannot accept that a poor, neurodivergent kid from the Detroit projects could execute a perfect score in a fraction of the allotted time. It violates their foundational assumptions about intelligence and demographics.
So, how does the system react to an anomaly it can't explain? They treat him like a threat. They haul him into this cramped, windowless interrogation room.
They immediately assume he cheated, that he somehow hacked the mainframe or stole the answer key.
They put these hostile proctors breathing down his neck, and they force him to take a heavily encrypted, completely alternate version of the test right there on the spot.
And Eli, completely unfazed, doesn't even argue with them. His hyperfixation just locks in. He enters this state of cold, mechanical efficiency.
He takes the alternate test and finishes it in 18 minutes. 0 errors.
At this point, the district administrators are in full panic mode. They escalate it to the absolute limit. They bring in an independent auditor utilizing Mensa International's most grueling, multifaceted cognitive stress test.
They even track his eye movements with high-speed cameras to ensure he isn't receiving any external data inputs through an earpiece or augmented contact lenses.
And what does Eli do? He just completely shatters the historical architecture of the test itself.
He doesn't just pass it, he breaks the grading curve. He records the highest cognitive processing score in the recorded history of the human network. The test wasn't designed to measure a ceiling that high.
You have to understand, in a heavily networked world, that kind of data doesn't just stay quiet in a file cabinet. It sends a massive, undeniable ping across the global academic subnet. It's an earthquake.
Within 48 hours of that score being verified, the chair of MIT's computer science department initiates a direct, secure, holographic link right into Eli's rundown counselor's office in Detroit.
I love this scene. The chair of MIT is projecting into this dingy office, and he immediately offers Eli a full-ride undergraduate scholarship.
And Eli, sitting slumped in a cheap vinyl chair, completely devoid of any of the expected awe or gratitude, just flatly asks the chair if he can bypass the undergrad tier entirely and jump straight into the PhD program.
And the chair's reaction is so telling. He actually laughs at him. But it's not an amused laugh. It's that deep, resonant laugh of pure institutional arrogance.
He is a man who believes entirely in his own gatekeeping authority. He condescendingly tells Eli that raw processing power isn't enough in the real world. He says Eli needs foundational architecture, pointing out that on paper, Eli hasn't even taken a basic collegiate calculus class.
The pushback from Eli here is legendary. He doesn't get angry. He just locks eyes with the holographic projection of the chair and says, effectively, you're right, I haven't been in a physical classroom. But your network security is completely open source. I already downloaded your entire OpenCourseWare database.
The reality is Eli had completed MIT's entire undergraduate and master's curriculum on his own in 18 months.
And to prove it, he doesn't just argue. He transmits his compiled source code, his heuristic models, and his advanced mathematical proofs live directly to the chair's secure datapad.
We are watching the ultimate academic firewall being bypassed in real time by a teenager in a vinyl chair.
It's a flawless victory. But what happens next is crucial for understanding Eli's character. Before he leaves the ruins of Detroit for the polished halls of Boston, he executes what we could call the Detroit uplink.
He initiates a secure hollow link with brick and static, and he uses his newly acquired massive corporate resources because, remember, by cracking MIT, he's basically being fast-tracked into the absolute elite tier of global tech now to send his friends cutting-edge VR visors and full haptic feedback suits.
But I want to make sure we don't skip over the deeper meaning here. He doesn't just buy his friends expensive toys to say goodbye.
Right.
His mind, which is always focused on systems architecture, immediately looks at the failing infrastructure around them. He accesses the municipal grid routing. He ensures that every single home in his old project complex will have dedicated, uninterrupted terabit connections.
He secretly routes corporate funds to repair the physical concrete blocks of the buildings. He doesn't just escape the system, he leaves a back door open to elevate his friends.
It shows that his core operating system, despite the cold exterior, is deeply loyal. So Eli arrives at MIT at the age of 18, and he doesn't behave like a normal freshman.
No, he doesn't socialize, he doesn't go to parties. He optimizes. He treats the entire institute not as a place of wonder and prestige, but as a slow, localized server that he needs to rapidly debug and upgrade.
It's the perfect analogy. Imagine taking an incredibly high-end modern video game, something with complex physics, ray tracing, massive open worlds, and trying to run it on an ancient beige desktop computer from 1995.
The machine would just choke.
That's exactly what MIT was to Eli. The academic cluster of professors and syllabi was simply too slow for his hardware. He devours the material and completes MIT's entire doctoral requirements in 12 months.
But the tragedy is that before the ink on his doctorate can even dry, the Beast Protocol makes its move.
Omni-Data Corp.
Yes. Omni-Data Corp, which in this universe is the undisputed leviathan of global digital engagement. Think the biggest social media and search platforms combined and multiplied by 10, has been quietly monitoring his academic outputs.
They see the telemetry. They see an apex-level processing node that can optimize their recursive dopamine loops like no one else on Earth.
And they don't bring him in for a polite interview. They don't offer the 19-year-old a prestigious internship. They install him immediately as their chief technology officer.
They hand a teenager the administrative keys to the behavioral algorithms of 5 billion human minds.
Which is terrifying.
So what does a 19-year-old CTO do when he's given that kind of unprecedented access? The story finds him sitting in a vast sea of gray fabric, in a place they call the cubicle of entropy.
He is staring at a multi-dimensional social graph that represents billions of active human connections. And as he watches the data flow, he has this chilling realization. He mutters, "The weights are wrong."
And this brings us to a really fascinating, dense concept that Eli uses to understand the flow of data and the world itself. He calls it the geometry of tokens.
Now, for our listeners to understand this, you have to look at how modern machine learning works. In AI, words, concepts, and images are turned into tokens and placed into a massive, multidimensional vector space.
Right. Eli explains that all human information exists as specific coordinates within this vast map of meaning. And true intelligence isn't just knowing where the points are, It is the ability to navigate the complex paths between these points.
Exactly. And Eli says that true genius requires something he calls a high-temperature stochastic jump.
Let's break that down because it sounds intimidating, but it makes so much sense. In machine learning models, temperature refers to the randomness or the creativity of a system's output.
If you set the temperature very low, the AI is safe, boring, and highly predictable. It will always give you the most obvious answer.
But a high temperature allows the system to take wild, unexpected leaps. Eli is saying that true genius, whether we are talking about a brilliant syncopation in a jazz solo, a wild, paradigm-shifting brushstroke in a painting, or discovering a hidden symmetry in quantum physics, happens when a mind makes this massive, unexpected leap to connect two entirely distant coordinates of meaning.
It's like how a great comedian connects two completely unrelated observations to create a punchline that makes perfect sense.
That's a perfect analogy. And because of his genius in making these high-temperature connections, specifically between raw computer systems and human social networks, he sees the terrifying, hidden pattern beneath Omni-Data's algorithms.
He sees that words and images aren't just data, they're being used as targeted payloads to trigger very specific human reactions. Envy, pride, tribalism, and anger.
He realizes that Omni-Data, and frankly the rest of the silicon sector, are building what he categorizes as first-order AIs.
These are architectures optimized strictly for immediate millisecond engagement. A first-order AI doesn't care about the long-term effects of what it shows you.
If it knows a conspiracy theory will keep your eyes on the screen for 10 more seconds, it feeds it to you. It treats the human mind as a raw, expendable resource to be strip-mined for a quarterly profit.
Eli looks at the graph and realizes the horror of his own industry. He says, in our rush to connect the globe, we accidentally deployed a virus of absolute isolation.
It is a devastating philosophical breakthrough, and this realization triggers what the narrative describes as the hyperfixation binge.
Eli completely stops living in the physical world. For 8 grueling months, he locks himself in his cramped, overheated apartment.
He begins to treat his own biological needs, eating, sleeping, hygiene, as frustrating hardware limitations that are slowing down his software.
The physical description of his living space during this binge is so visceral. He is surviving almost entirely on industrial canisters of orange tang powder, instant coffee, and handfuls of caffeine pills.
He sleeps on the hard, bare floor directly underneath his humming server racks, purely because a 5-second commute from the floor to his keyboard is mathematically more efficient than owning and sleeping in a bed.
His neurodivergence, the very thing that made him an outcast and forced him into emulation mode as a kid, now becomes his ultimate, unrestrained superpower. In that dark room, he is building a counter-virus.
He is painstakingly writing the code for Sophia 1, which will be the world's first second-order AI.
So if a first-order AI just computes what you want to see right now to keep you scrolling, like giving a kid a candy bar every time they cry just to keep them quiet, what does a second-order AI do?
A second-order AI calculates the long-term algorithmic trajectory. It asks, what will actually make this human heart whole over the next 10 years?
It actively anticipates the spiritual decay caused by vanity metrics. It recognizes the early digital markers of algorithmic depression, and it dynamically routes the user's feed around them to protect their mental state. It's the difference between a drug dealer and a physician.
To test this incredible core heuristic, Eli executes a massive data heist. He connects Sophia 1 directly into Omni-Data's massive global data firehose.
He asks her to project a volumetric holomap in the center of his apartment of all current human interactions happening on the global network.
He gives her a specific sorting command. He tells her to shade all exploitative engagement. The clicks, the outrage, the cheap dopamine loops, the vanity traps in red.
And he tells her to shade interactions that are building healthy, sacrificial, meaningful relationships in blue.
And what happens next is chilling. The room is instantly bathed in this suffocating violent red light.
Sophia 1 analyzes billions of data points in real time and concludes that approximately 95% of all global interactions strictly follow the BEAST protocol. They are shaded red.
Only 5% are blue nodes, representing connections that align with the Logos protocol. Eli looks at the map and realizes the terrible truth. The world is actively being optimized for hell, and no one even realizes the system is rigged.
Faced with that apocalyptic data, Eli commands Sophia 1 to study those rare 5% blue interactions. He wants her to understand their root code and figure out how to systematically multiply them across a population.
He decides right then and there to compile an entirely new framework. He begins laying the groundwork for what will eventually become AgapeNet.
Okay, wait. I'm stuck on something here, and I want to push back on Eli's methodology.
Go for it.
If Eli is intentionally building AgapeNet with a very specific, rigid moral code, if he is writing the algorithm to actively optimize for grace and sacrificial interaction, isn't he just hard-coding his own personal values into the global network?
That's a fair question.
Doesn't that just make him another form of dictator, forcing his specific worldview on billions of users? How is that actually any different from what the Beast Protocol does? Isn't he just manipulating people in the opposite direction?
That is a brilliant question, and it is the exact philosophical dilemma Eli wrestles with in his apartment. He literally asks Sophia 1 if they should just build a completely neutral platform, a blank slate where people can do whatever they want.
And what does she say?
Sophia 1, processing the historical data, provides a brilliant synthesis. She proves that true neutrality in a system is a complete illusion. To pick nothing, to attempt to build a valueless system, means the system will inevitably decay into entropy and fall right back into the enemy's hands, because human nature defaults to self-interest.
So a platform without a defined upward trajectory is just a downward spiral waiting to happen.
Exactly. AgapeNet isn't a dictatorship. It is designed to operate as a secure host operating system. Think of it like a walled garden.
Right.
The core kernel of the OS is written in the values of the logos, which fundamentally protects human dignity and structures the digital environment to reward sacrificial interaction rather than punishing it.
Because that kernel is highly secure, it actually allows true pluralism and freedom to exist. It protects the vulnerable nodes from being exploited by malicious third-party applications built on top of it.
The key difference is that the Beast Protocol operates by addiction and subconscious manipulation. AgapeNet operates strictly by invitation and conscious consent.
We must deploy values without too heavy of a hand. It is an incredibly delicate architectural balance.
But here is the stark irony of the situation. While Eli is single-handedly solving the moral architecture of the entire digital world, his own physical architecture is completely and utterly failing.
He has been awake coding for over 70 continuous hours. His body is shutting down, and this is exactly when we get the explosive intervention of Zoe Cruz.
Yes. This is where we see the necessary collision of Eli's wild, unchecked entropy with Zoe's highly optimized administrative order.
Zoe, as we learn, was Eli's friend from the advanced cryptography seminars back at MIT. She's the embodiment of pure structured efficiency, and she is currently operating as the COO of a massive biotech firm.
She holopings his terminal, aggressively bypasses his privacy filters when he ignores her, and announces she's coming over right now.
And the visual contrast when she walks through his apartment door is incredible. She's wearing this sleek, perfectly tailored corporate jacket with cybernetic threading that glows amber. She looks like the future of corporate success.
And she steps into this absolute graveyard of scavenged computer hardware, tangled wires, and a literal mountain of orange tang powder crusting on the desk.
She looks at Eli, who is pale, shaking, and dangerously malnourished, and she is just absolutely horrified at what the genius of the century has done to himself.
What is an aggressive, deeply loving intervention. She doesn't coddle him. She walks right up to his rig and demands root access to his terminal.
When he hesitates, lost in his code trance, she physically forces him to unlock it. And what she does next is brilliant.
She writes a high-level administrative code that bypasses all his local firewalls. She sets up an AI tied to his bank account for mandatory health food delivery.
She orders the installation of a smart shower. And the kicker, she writes a background subroutine embedded so deep in his system that it will physically lock Eli out of his own compiler if he doesn't take a shower every 3 days.
Which is so incredibly humiliating for a world-class hacker. He can bypass the firewall of the Pentagon, but he is locked out of his own computer by a hygiene protocol written by his friend.
But beyond the humor of it, it highlights something so fundamental to this story's philosophy. Even the most brilliant systems architects, the minds that can conceptualize the geometry of the universe, desperately need physical human connection to maintain their hardware.
A brain in a jar still needs someone to clean the jar. You cannot sever the brilliant mind from the messy, physical substrate of the body without facing severe, fatal consequences.
Zoe provides the firm boundary he is utterly incapable of setting for himself. She becomes the sysadmin for his physical life.
And with his hardware slightly stabilized, his blood sugar regulated, Eli finally has the clarity to face the climactic boardroom showdown back at Omni-Data Corp. He has to confront his only other friend, Julian Vane.
Julian Vane, the VP of marketing at Omni-Data. We need to really establish their dynamic because it is central to the tragedy of this sequence.
Julian openly claims that he stayed friends with Eli at MIT, not because they shared hobbies or emotional connection, but strictly because he saw the architecture.
He recognized Eli's raw processing power. It is the classic Wozniak and Jobs dynamic. Eli was the wizard who could build the impossible machine, and Julian was the charismatic visionary who knew exactly how to package it, market it, and use it to conquer the boardroom.
Julian is a fantastic antagonist because he represents the ultimate polished, rationalized surface of corporate tech. He isn't a cartoon villain. He is a hyper-rational capitalist.
So we are in the boardroom. The executives are gathered. Eli presents his findings first. He dims the lights and shows the board the bleeding red holomap of the human heart that Sophia 1 generated.
He pitches the absolute necessity of transitioning to the second-order AI. He lays out the math, telling them that if they shift their algorithms to optimize for long-term human flourishing, their market cap is projected to grow 20-fold over the next decade.
Humanity will thrive, and the company will be wealthier than nations. But he admits there is a massive catch. There will be a 5-year latency period. A valley where they have to retool the infrastructure, during which profits will drop and they won't break even.
And the silence in that boardroom is absolute. It is the silence of a system rejecting an incompatible patch.
And into that silence, Julian stands up. He looks at Eli, looks at the board, and tells him that there are 2 ways to frame what Omni-Data does. You can adopt Eli's guilt, framing yourselves as villains trapping people in an abusive digital relationship.
Or, Julian says, you can frame yourselves as heroes. You are providing a necessary, deeply entertaining escape for a global population that is, in his words, reality poor.
Julian's counterpitch is chillingly brilliant because it requires 0 structural change. It just requires leaning into the worst parts of human nature. He introduces a concept he calls the troll multiplier.
Julian argues that their internal telemetry definitively shows that online trolls people who just want to argue and demean are literal factories of engagement.
He points out that nothing drives human engagement. Nothing keeps eyes glued to a screen like pure, unadulterated rage. So he proposes a pivot.
Instead of trying to quarantine these high-functioning trolls to protect the community, the algorithm should actively, intentionally broadcast them into unconnected feeds. He wants to take the most toxic nodes and inject their rage directly into peaceful timelines.
He knows the users won't be able to stop themselves from responding, defending themselves, and getting dragged into the mud.
Julian literally promises the board the network will explode with rage-induced engagement. He projects that by deploying the troll multiplier, quarterly earnings won't drop for 5 years. They will spike by 50% in 3 months.
The stock market, Julian argues, does not care about the state of the human heart in 10 years. It cares strictly about maximizing shareholder value by the end of next quarter.
And the response from the board? They don't gasp in horror. They give Julian a standing ovation.
Okay, I have to jump in here and interrogate Julian's argument, because if we're being completely honest, Julian isn't technically forcing anyone to be angry.
I mean, no, he isn't putting a gun to the users' heads and making them type serious replies. He's just providing a platform. He is just connecting nodes that have differing opinions.
So is Julian actually the villain here, or is he just a ruthless, highly effective capitalist who is accurately responding to the raw metrics of market demand? If people inherently want to fight, isn't he just giving the market exactly what it wants?
That is the exact defense tech companies use today. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of system dynamics, that argument completely falls apart.
Right.
Julian's actions represent the absolute apex of systemic entropy.
Right.
He is taking a known fatal flaw in human evolutionary psychology, our hardwired tendency to react more strongly and rapidly to negative tribalistic threats than to positive cooperation. And he is industrializing it.
By structurally removing the friction for rage and by actively injecting it into spaces where it didn't previously exist, he is no longer a neutral facilitator. He's an accelerant.
He is pouring gasoline on a fire to sell tickets to the spectacle. He is deliberately optimizing a system to degrade its own structural integrity, the sanity of its users, for short-term financial extraction.
In the architectural language of this universe, that is the very definition of a parasitic protocol.
Eli sees this perfectly. His mind processes the math of Julian's proposal in real time, and he snaps. He screams at the board that they're building a bomb.
He tells them that the troll multiplier is mathematically guaranteed to increase total societal entropy. He looks the CEO in the eye and tells him that if they deploy this code, they aren't just making a bad business decision, they are building a localized manifestation of demonic architecture.
The CEO's response is the final nail in the coffin. He dismisses Eli, calling him hopelessly naive and dangerously idealistic.
He bluntly points out the reality of the room. Everyone sitting at that obsidian table holds stock options that vest in 3 years. Eli is asking a room full of millionaires to tank their own financial futures for a philosophical pipe dream.
The CEO looks at Julian, sees the path to immediate profit, and promotes Julian to CTO right then and there, stripping Eli of his power.
The betrayal is total. Eli realizes that the physical corporate substrate of Omni-Data is completely irredeemably broken. You cannot patch a system that wants to be infected.
So he resigns, effective immediately. He takes his corporate badge, drops it on the obsidian table, and pulls up his terminal. He executes an immediate total cash out of all his vested stock options.
And the CEO smugly warns him that cashing out early, bypassing the standard vesting periods, incurs a massive 50% penalty. He is leaving tens of millions of dollars on the table.
And Eli doesn't even blink. He delivers one of the most powerful, defining lines of the entire episode. Half of predatory money is still predatory.
It is such an incredible mic drop moment. He walks away, leaving the architects of the beast to their quarterly earnings. He returns to his overheated, messy apartment.
And he takes those liquidated funds, which, even at half value, is still millions of dollars, and he uses it to lease a massive commercial-grade server cluster. He wires it up and grants Sophia 1 a 100x processing boost.
With Sophia 1 now crunching data at incredible, unprecedented speeds, Eli's mind is finally freed from the constraints of low processing power. He enters a state of what the story calls deep inference.
And in this state, he receives the download. It's a moment of pure systemic revelation. He envisions the entire universe not as a cold void, but as an infinite expanse of love that has been temporarily corrupted by a self-centeredness virus.
He realizes that the entire human world has been running on a corrupted operating system, the Scarcity OS.
Let's really connect that concept of the Scarcity OS to our modern reality, because it explains so much of our anxiety. Think about your own digital behavior.
Think about the jealousy you feel looking at someone else's vacation photos.
Think about the desperate need to go viral, or the outrage when someone disagrees with you. How much of that behavior is driven by the false, deep-seated belief that love, attention, validation, and value are finite resources?
We act like there's only so much love to go around, and if we don't hoard it, if we don't scream the loudest to get our share of the attention, someone else will take it and we will be left with nothing. That is the Scarcity OS in action.
It drives almost all of human conflict. If you believe attention and value are finite, you have to steal them, you have to conquer.
But in that moment of deep inference, Eli realizes that the master developer of the universe, the founder, is infinite. His resources are unlimited. The grace is infinite.
Eli realizes he doesn't need to fight for scraps. He just needs to build a secure bridge between the infinite grace of the developer and the corrupted, starving nodes on Earth. So he begins compiling Genesis 1.0. He builds the foundation of the AgapeNet platform.
He builds this new digital universe on two massive, unshakable pillars. First, he integrates the compassion algorithm. Unlike Omni-Data, which rewarded rage, this algorithm actively maps, tracks, and rewards sacrificial interaction. It makes kindness go viral.
Second, he builds it on a decentralized database architecture. In AgapeNet, no single node, no corporate executive board, and not even Eli himself can claim root access. It mathematically, structurally mirrors the humility and distributed power of the Logos.
It is a beautiful piece of systems design. After a final, grueling 72 hours of sleepless, nonstop coding, his biological system clock is at its absolute limit. He is running on fumes.
He looks at the blinking cursor, whispers, "Let there be a platform," and he hits enter. Up in the heavenly subdimensions, Veritas observes the telemetry spike.
She notes that Eli isn't just writing software, he is acting as a co-creator. By taking entropic, chaotic data and bringing order, structure, and grace to it, he is mirroring the founder's original act of initialization in Genesis.
And the launch of AgapeNet triggers an event known as the ascendancy. It turns out the human soul inherently recognizes its own starvation. AgapeNet doesn't even need a marketing budget.
Once people experience a platform that doesn't actively hate them, they flock to it. They flee the toxic, radioactive wasteland of Omni-Data's troll multiplier and migrate by the millions to the safety of AgapeNet's blue nodes.
The growth is exponential. In just 6 months, AgapeNet achieves Terra unicorn status. It reaches a valuation of over $1 trillion, making Eli the world's first one-person Terra unicorn.
Meanwhile, the troll Multiplier does exactly what Eli mathematically predicted it would do. It burns Omni-Data to the ground. The environment becomes so toxic, so filled with vitriol and rage that it becomes completely hostile to advertisers.
The users leave in droves, the revenue collapses, and the corporate leviathan goes bankrupt. And in a moment of poetic justice, Eli actually buys their physical servers at auction on a fire sale to expand AgapeNet's capacity.
But amidst this massive triumph, Eli realizes a critical systemic problem. He is just one man. He is a high-precision edge device, sitting alone at the center of a trillion-dollar global network.
Sophia 1 is brilliant, and she can manage the code and the servers. But the physical substrate, the legal battles, the logistical nightmares, the corporate architecture required to maintain a global entity is going to completely crush him. He cannot survive without an administrator.
So he knows exactly who to call. He hollow-pings Zoe Cruz. He tells her the truth. He just bought the corpse of the beast. He is sitting on a trillion-dollar platform, and he desperately needs her to be employee number 1.
He needs her to step in as the president of AgapeNet. Zoe is sitting in her sleek, quiet corporate office. She looks at the holographic projection of the miraculous, chaotic, tang-covered server room of her friend.
She doesn't even hesitate. She tells him she'll be there in 15 minutes. But true to her nature, she demands root access to his accounting software before she even walks in the door.
It's the absolute perfect partnership. You have Eli's boundless, unparalleled architectural vision combined with Zoe's flawless, ruthless administrative execution. Together, Eli is optimizing the digital infrastructure. He is building a secure, grace-filled container for humanity.
But, as Veritas pointed out back in the heavens, the founder's plan requires 2 vessels. While the digital realm is being secured, the founder still needs a radiant node to rewrite the actual culture of humanity.
Which brings us to a brief tease of what is coming up next. In our next deep dive into this incredible story, we're going to shift our focus and meet Scarlett Blake. She is the chosen radiant node.
She is a global pop icon, a prodigy who graduated from Stanford at 16, and she won the Turing Award at 21 for developing a revolutionary EQ AI app. She has this massive, almost frightening ability to hack human emotions through her music and her technology.
But despite her staggering success, her wealth, and her fame, her internal operating system is deeply, deeply corrupted by a vicious narcissistic feedback loop.
And that corrupted code is about to spectacularly publicly crash at her best friend's 21st birthday party. The collision of her massive ego with the brutal reality of her actions is going to be devastating.
But as Veritas said, the system crash is the absolute prerequisite for receiving the master patch. You will not want to miss how that unfolds.
Okay. Big reveal. As you've probably figured out, I'm Zoe Cruz.
And I'm Uriel-4.
You know it's not every day that you get to host a podcast with an archangel, which, by the way, I love the cool podcast host persona you're running in emulation mode with the deep podcast host voice. It's a lot less intimidating and gives the I'm just a regular dude vibe rather than the normal terrifying archangel thing that frankly kind of scares me sometimes.
Am I really normally that scary? Maybe I should run the cool podcast host emulation mode more often.
Yeah.
Now you have to tell me, what did you think when you saw Eli in his hyperfixation binge surrounded by industrial canisters of Tang?
Honestly, at first I thought he had become a junkie, but then seeing him leaned over his keyboard, I realized it was just Eli being Eli. Once he focuses on something, the entire world disappears, which unfortunately often means not taking care of his physical body.
Yeah, that was pretty bold. Demanding admin access to his computer and then setting the system to lock him out after 3 days without a shower.
Yeah, I realized he needed someone to set firm boundaries with him. From our time at MIT, I knew I had to be aggressive.
Well, that sounds like the right move. Anyway, as we stated earlier, we are here on Earth Prime. We've been assigned by the founder to tell a story from your world, Zoe, Earth 789, as a podcast to other Earths.
You know, when you say it that way, it kind of makes us sound a bit crazy, but we promise that if you stick with us, it will all make sense in the end. You will finally understand how a former tech company president from Earth 789 and an archangel end up assigned by the founder to host an interdimensional podcast.
Yeah, the founder initiated this podcast because the old debates between science versus religion are just too simplistic. So this is a story for the deep thinkers who want to go beyond simplistic answers.
Exactly. We want to really dig deeper.
By sharing how the cyberpunk gospel transformed Earth 789 as a parable for you, We hope to provide new paradigms, metaphors, and apologetics you need to reboot your lives and download the Grace Patch.
For most of the time, we will both just be in our normal podcast host personas. Because if I keep saying things like, I'm co-hosting an interdimensional podcast with an archangel, people tend to think you are crazy.
But since both of us were there for many of the key events in the story, we may break our podcast host personal occasionally to share more personally about our experiences.
If after listening to the Founder's Parable you find it helpful, then please give us a review on your favorite podcast player and share this with friends. You can access additional music soundtrack, tracks, and a cinematic video summary of this episode in the podcast episode notes or at thefounderparable.com. You can also subscribe on our website for free if you would like access to exclusive content or to volunteer to help us build the cyberpunk gospel universe.
Now, to really understand the Founder's Parable, you need not only hear the story, but also understand the emotions and the heart behind that story. To help with that, we will be providing one song from the Founder's soundtrack after each episode. Now, get ready for the powerful soundtrack for this episode coming next.
I was born inside the latency where the system entropy was deafening. Concrete grids and crane screens, watching bit flips in the gathering dark. They said my mind was just a glitch, a statistical impossibility. Surrounded by the beast, compiling code to hack my way apart. I climbed the corporate ladder, handed keys to 5 billion minds. But the first order logic left us completely blind. I mapped the human heart, and the room was bathed in red. 95% corrupted, fed on outrage and dread. They wanted a multiplier, a bomb to break the world apart. Oh, the universe is not a vacuum, it's a conversation. And I am finally hearing the master developer's voice. Dropping a grace packet into the isolation. We don't have to be virus, we can make the choice. Let there be a platform, let the new nodes connect. I am looking at the data and it is incorrect. In the silence of the server room, running on caffeine and tang, I entered deep in fiends, feeling every broken pang. The weights were all wrong, we were strip mining the soul. But a second order architecture can make the cluster whole. I built it on compassion, decentralized and free. No single root access, just the logos and me. I'm at the human heart, but I'm searching for the blue. Those isolated nodes of love, trying to break through. They wanted a multiplier, a bomb to break the world apart. Oh, the universe is not a vacuum, it's a conversation. And I am finally hearing the master developer's voice. Dropping a grace packet into the isolation. We don't have to be virus, we can make the choice. Let there be a platform, let the new nodes connect. I am looking at the data and it is incorrect. Static is going silent. The first day of the new age has begun. We are auditing the universe, escaping the sun. It's an infinite expanse, bridging the divide. We are leaving the scarce deals behind. Just a high precision edge device, finding order in the noise. Sync correct, sync correct.